Hey, good morning, guys. All right, I'm going to give a few minutes for everyone to get here. Good morning. Hi, everyone. Let me get Kristina in here. Good morning, everyone. Hey, Lady. Hi, guys. Hey, Kristina. Good morning.
Hi, everybody.
So, I'm Sarah Walworth. This is
Kristina McGrath. Hi. We're tech editors,
we're
knitting
tech
tech editors.
knitting tech editors, and we are here this morning for a tech tip talk about pitfalls in sweater design. Before we start, we want to emphasize that our starting tech tip talk again doesn't mean that things are back to normal and we're just getting back to knitting or anything like that. Um, we want to acknowledge that there's been a lot of changes in the world, and we hope that all the changes that are happening now are really changes happening for good, not only in our community but in society. So I don't know. This is, I'm awkward with my words. Sorry, Kristina.
No,
Um,
but that's how we feel. Like we really do hope that, and we aren't going to stop working for that.
so in our own personal lives, we're doing things to stand in the gap, and you all can go look that up if you're white and you need some definition for that. And in our own ways, we are working on helping build our community locally and in online. We feel it's important for us to be here for you guys and to connect with you and to offer our skills and our knowledge and continue to be a resource to knitting designers and tech editors. So that's why we're here again today, not because things are back to normal, because we don't ever feel like things can go back to how they were before. Um,
And shouldn't.
so, and shouldn't. Um, if you want to talk to us about these matters, feel free to direct message us. Today we're going to talk about sweaters, and we don't want it to seem like it's flippant or frivolous. We feel we are really want to provide a resource for you guys here.
We
This
we
is
just we want to continue to help because we are still tech editing sweaters and
mhm.
still finding things people are struggling with.
And we want to give you an opportunity to ask us questions about the things that we have skills in so that you can get the help that you need in this forum, in this place. So if you have questions about sweater design, sweater pattern writing, the things that you get stuck on when you're designing a sweater, please feel free to put it into the comments down below. And we love it when you guys ask questions, and we love it when you talk to us about your problems so that we can help you and give you some resources and some ideas. I think that's all for intro. Kristina had a great idea for our time together is to address the common pitfalls that we see come across our desk in sweater design. Like the things that we see over and over again are an
Over and
issue
over.
in related to sizing, to related to even writing. So maybe we can start with the biggest problem, which is gauge.
You're kind of breaking up a little bit, Sarah.
Oh no. Okay, I'm wondering if I need to move to a different part of the house.
You are a little bit. I'm really glad you guys joined us.
Yeah, hold on. Maybe I need to move to a different place where I get better reception. So you guys aren't going to see my twinkle lights anymore. Let me take my list. Okay, so we're going to talk about gauge. Go,
Yeah, we need to talk
Kristina.
about gauge. So these are things that we see over and over again that people, um, a lot of it is understanding how bodies work and change across sizes, and some of it is just understanding designing and how things need to be implemented when you're creating a garment for different size bodies. But the first thing that would be really good to get out of the way that affects everything is your gauge. If you are designing a sweater for all these different sizes and you need to fit so many different points and you're using whatever 5 stitches to the inch and you're calculating all your measurements and basing all your grading on your 5 stitches to the inch stitch gauge, and you do all the grading that way, your testers are going to base all their knitting that way, your tech editor is going to use those numbers to correct your pattern and make sure all your numbers are correct. If it turns out that that gauge is not the gauge of the sample and that gauge is not the gauge you really designed with, your testers are going to get all kinds of trouble. Your tech editor is not going to be able to help you because they're going to maybe say to you, oh, this doesn't work because it comes out too big or too small or whatever it is. And then you change your pattern, you're going to end up with it wrong in a different way because your gauge is incorrect. It's really
Exactly.
important to know what gauge you're working with before you do all this, so that every step along the way is going to be successful and then in turn successful for the knitter.
So
It really matters. Like, none of this stuff we're going to talk about makes any difference if your gauge is wrong.
Exactly. Especially the row gauge. A lot of the things that we're going to
Yeah.
talk about have to do with row or round gauge, which is your length, or depth and your length. So if that is off in your calculations, then it's going to affect all these other things that we're going to talk about. How do you find your gauge is to use a huge swath of your sample. If you have knit a sample sweater, then you could probably use most of the body of the back to determine your gauge. It could also, I wouldn't go from like we talked about in a previous session, you shouldn't use a 4x4 or a 2x2 inch swatch to write your pattern. You've got to use a large amount. So it may be as much as 10 inches or 12 inches of your finished sample. And it's okay to make adjustments. So in other words, you do your preliminary gauge with a small sample, and then or with a small gauge swatch, and then you knit your sample and you find out maybe your gauge has changed a little bit. Then that needs to be adjusted in your spreadsheet calculation. Whatever you give your tech editor as the finished gauge is going to be how he or she calculates all and confirms all of the measurements. So if that number is inaccurate, you're going to be up a crick, because then it's not going to be accurate for your knitters when they go to knit from your pattern.
You're all crackly still, but I can hear you.
Oh no, really? I
You
tried.
look very blurry and weird, and every now and then it like swirls around, but I was able to hear everything you said.
I'm sorry. I wish there was a way that I could do this better, but I'm in the place where I have the best reception. I'm sorry, guys.
Well, we can hear you, so that's good.
Okay, so just don't ignore it. Just ignore my face and listen to my words. So we're going to talk about necklines next. The
Necklines.
necklines. The first place that we see in most patterns where there's an issue is the neckline width across sizes. So
Oh, we're
neckline.
losing you, sort of.
I wonder if I should go.
Oh, Victoria said she can hear everything. Just in that 1 second, we lost you a little bit.
Okay, just
Oh,
fuzzy
good.
photo.
So it's just me, maybe.
Oh, so
Oh,
don't pay
good. Thank
attention
you,
to my
guys.
face. Thank you very much, you guys. Please ask us questions if you have them in the comments. Um, I'll try to get into my Wi-Fi the next time I do this so that I don't have to be fuzzy. But we want neckline, the thing that most designers struggle with. A lot of times if you're working from a top-down design, you're starting here with your designing, right? So what kind of issues do you see, Kristina?
I wasn't able to hear what you said, but
Oof.
necklines are lots of times um, made too tight or made too wide. Sometimes I mean, close, but it can't be so close that it's too tight, and it can't be so wide that it falls off someone's shoulders unless that's your intent. So, lots of times as we go from size to size and trying to achieve different size um, bust sizes, sometimes the necklines start out too big, sometimes they start out too small. So there are a few measurements on size charts that pertain to necklines that can help you figure out how to get that size that you need across your sizes. It's just something to watch out for. Um, and that's, another place where, like right at the beginning or something, your gauge is going to make a big difference. And that's another thing to think about too, is that oftentimes the neckline is a different stitch pattern than perhaps the rest of the garment. So you also have to know, maybe your knitter doesn't need to know, but you need to know
Mm-hmm.
your gauge for any stitch pattern that you're using in your garment, because your cuffs and your hem and your neckline are often different stitch patterns that are not the main gauge of the pattern. And that's
Mm-hmm.
going to make it different than the calculations you're doing for everything else. So you need to know that too. And it's
So,
helpful to tell your tech editor that, or they're going to calculate it with the body gauge.
mhm.
And I think there are some things about necklines that don't get considered. Like, I don't want to say, I'm so, but if you've got some lots of sweaters have like a drop in the back where the
Mhm.
short rows are made to make room for your back. Um, if there's a V neck or something, that needs to be incorporated into the whole front of the sweater. And you need to be careful how you're doing that and making sure that you're doing the shaping you need on the side. Oh, we
Mhm.
have a comment or a question. Just the other day, I made a comment on a post about swatches versus no swatch. I realized they were talking, usually make mine at least 20 centimeters, 8 inches. It's
Mhm.
a really good idea. Stitch gauge is going to change, and row gauge is going to change the more you work. It's much more accurate to get a by inch, measurement if you get it over a large area instead of just a little tiny bit. It's always going to be more accurate the more stitches and rows that you measure.
And make sure your swatch has all the stitches in it that are used in your sample, not just the body stitch, but also trim. Am I still breaking up? Do we need to start a new session?
Do you think that would help?
It might. Hi, Praji. I'm wondering if connected to my Wi-Fi. Would you guys like
Yeah, I'm
me
having a
to?
hard time.
Yeah,
Oh,
maybe I
there
should
you're good
start.
for a second.
Maybe I should start for a new session. um, I'm gonna go in and out a little bit, but necklines are really important if your trim, like Christina said, is a different stitch. You need to calculate according to that stitch gauge, not your body gauge, for the opening and for the width from the distance from here to here. If you are considering it against a size chart, it should be a percentage or a ratio to the shoulder width or to the neckline girth, the circumference around this area. Necklines are where the whole sweater hangs from this point on the body. So if you don't get the neckline opening correct, like if it's too wide in the larger sizes, it will fall off the shoulders.
And
So
having it be
this,
too wide in larger sizes is really common thing that we see a lot.
mhm.
That is what
It's
ends up happening. It's
we
because the neck is one of those places on the body that does not change in the same way that the bust changes.
exactly. And then that affects the armhole depth, which was the next thing that we had on our list. Armhole depth should be a particular amount beyond the underarm measurement of the body. So if you have like a distance from the shoulder to the underarm, and then you add design ease, that amount of design ease should be added across all the sizes.
Right.
If you have an armhole depth that goes all the way to the waist in some sizes, then your knitters are not getting the same sweater that maybe is in your sample.
That I mean, that's one of the biggest ones, right? Is the armhole depths being too large
Mm-hmm.
as the sizes change. Um,
Yeah.
because the bicep changes a much
Mm-hmm.
larger amount
Mm-hmm.
than the armhole depth changes. So you
Yes.
need to achieve this upper arm measurement without ending up with armholes that go down past your bust.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
you're going to have your bust that you tried to achieve way down in their belly, and the
Mm-hmm.
sweater is not going to be the correct fit. So that's why size charts are so important, because armhole depths on, we talked about size charts before, so you can look at, the ones we like and why, but um, the armhole depth changes very slightly.
Mm-hmm.
And like Sarah said, you need to add that same exact ease. You don't want to have 1 inch of ease in the armhole depth in the first two sizes, and then the next two sizes you have 3 inches of positive ease in the armhole, and that keeps happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And getting bigger, and you do end up with armholes down at your waist. So that's something we see all the time that you really have to be careful of, and that's where size charts, I think, are so important to
And it
look
and
at.
it will it may take a lot. It may take different math in the larger or the very smaller sizes to you may have to do different shaping rates from the shoulder to the armhole depth. And this then compounds the underarm to the hip measurement. So if your armhole depth is super deep in the larger sizes, and then all of the underarm to hip measurements are the same across all sizes, then your sweater may be too long, maybe tunic length instead of hip length. Or if the sample is hip length, then it may extend too deep. So all of these points that a tech editor will check in your sweater design are based not just on gauge, but also they compound with each other as we check through the sweater. So,
Well, that's everything is related.
mm-hmm,
Everything has to do with everything else. you
right.
know the underarm to hip measurement is going to change across sizes, right? It's not always going to be the same, and lots of times I see that it's the same, and
Right.
it's not really always going to be. um, if you if you don't have bust darts, for example, and you have a larger bust, you are going to need a little more length depending on the fit of the sweater. If you
Yes.
have a design that has intentionally deep armholes, then you maybe in the larger sizes will need less
Mm-hmm.
inches from the underarm to the hip. But it's not usually exactly the same. And I think that the underarm to hip, or the hip to underarm, whichever way the sweater is being made, I think is a really good time. And sometimes in the sleeve also, depending on what kind of sleeve you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're doing a drop shoulder, the sleeve measurement that you work from the armhole to the wrist is going to be shorter as the sizes get
Mm-hmm.
bigger. It's not going to be longer. So
Right.
lots of times that underarm to hip, hip to underarm sleeve is a really good place to put in what you think it should be based on how you want it to fit, and the ease you want and the fit you want and the style you want, and then maybe right or to desired length, because
Right. Yeah, exactly.
everybody is a different height. Everybody's arms are slightly different lengths. Not a lot, but a little bit, right? Everybody's a different height. Everybody has different, some people are going to need it shorter than you suggest, and some people are going to need it longer, even if they're going for hitting on the place you intend, right? Even if they want the look you have, they might need to knit it to a different length than you think based on the size charts you're using, because who knows what height that's based on, you know?
So think about as you're designing, where are those points, much like in a sewing pattern, where you can add modification notes, like where you can say you can lengthen here, or you can knit to your desired length. People don't necessarily get taller as the circumference of the body increases.
That's right.
Everybody is a different height. For instance, I'm 5'7", Christina's 5'8.5". We may need to knit a sweater longer than a typical 5'5" pattern size chart is written for. So it's really smart. Think ahead to your knitter's needs to add in these points of modification of the sleeve length and the underarm to hip. This also gives you kind of an out if if your knitters need to shorten or extend the length of the sweater, then maybe your lengths don't could be the same from underarm to hip if your armhole depths change. Not to say that that you can have a shortcut for grading, but if the upper body is graded really well from the shoulder to the bust, then that distance to the hip, if there isn't a lot of shaping happening, can be a place where the knitter can modify.
Well,
Does
and
that?
you can also give them like mile marker, like
Mm-hmm.
if it's meant to fit a particular way, or it needs to, say you are working from the bottom up and there's something else that's going to happen up here, you can say knit work to desired length, and it should fall at the X place on your body, right? Or you
Right.
can say, if you're going to do some kind of rolled cuff or some sort of decoration or something on the wrist, you can say to work desired length, leaving enough room for X thing that's going to happen,
Right.
and
Or
let them
like
know
knit to
where
desired length, less of
2 inches
5
for
or
cuff or whatever,
3 inches for the cuff.
you
Yeah.
know, or where on your body this body is supposed to stop, you know,
Right. Upper hip, lower hip. Be specific. Help
right.
the knitter out with that. So you guys have questions about what parts of sweater and garment design that trip you up that maybe we can help you out with or answer your questions, put it into the comments. What do you guys struggle with when you are designing a sweater to get right for your knitters? Because we have one really big last point on the body that we see over and over and over again. That
Two,
is two. Oh, did I miss one? Oh, we did. We're talking about arms next.
talking about armholes, so we'll just
Go ahead. Biceps and then wrists.
bicep, the upper arm measurement. I I found, and I think a lot of feedback I see from knitters, a lot of feedback I see from what designers hear, and there's a lot of unsureness. It's not even a word. I can't even think. There's a lot of
Uncertainty.
uncertainty. Thank you. Good God.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of uncertainty about where, how large or small that upper arm measure, the bicep is on a body, as
Right.
in each different size.
Right.
Because I think it varies so greatly.
Right.
Okay,
Exactly.
because bodies change, bodies grow in different ways in different places.
Mm-hmm.
Not every, we're not cookie cutter gingerbread men and women.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, I, I always kind of like to err on the side of caution. Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, if you go to the size chart and the size chart, you might want to make sure in your design that you leave a little room in the bicep. Not
Mm-hmm.
so much, not so much positive ease that it's going to look bad or that
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to fit the way it's supposed to, but maybe just so there's a little wiggle room, you know, in the larger sizes. Biceps tend to be, that's what I found. That's a lot of the feedback that I get. So it helps if there's a way to give a modification
Mm-hmm.
for the upper arm at all, or at least, and this is a place where for the knitter, it's really helpful if your pattern includes, before they buy it. I mean, I'm a big proponent of that. I think the measurements should be like on the pattern page, because
Mm-hmm.
you
On the
nothing like
pattern page in
spending.
Ravelry, wherever
Yeah. Oh,
you're, or
sorry.
on your
Yeah.
website,
Or yeah, somewhere a
wherever
blog
you're
post.
advertising it.
Yeah, a link that they can go to find the size chart for the pattern before they buy it. Like, you spend money on a pattern and you're like, oh, it's not going to fit me, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So if the gauge is correct on your pattern and the measurements are all listed for all the points that are going to matter for fit,
Mm-hmm.
then they can decide how they need to modify it if they need to, and if they don't, great. But just know that that's an area that is often misunderstood and uncertain.
Goody Two Sticks asks, how much positive ease in bicep is reasonable but not sloppy? I
So,
personally think, this is just my opinion. I know Kristina would have a completely different opinion. So
oh, I
you're going
don't
to take
know.
two tech editors' ideas. Goody Two Sticks, what I think is whatever positive ease is in the sample size. So for instance, if you knit a 40-inch bust sample and you include 2 inches of positive ease at the bicep, then that 2 inches needs to be included across all the sizes. It shouldn't change.
No.
It and you may need to also adjust for how it fits. So the amount of positive ease gives movement depending on the design. If it's a drop shoulder, you may need less positive ease. If it's the positive ease is what gives movement for the arm. If there's not any ease there and it's a tight shoulder, such as a set-in sleeve, you're not going to have a lot of movement unless the sweater is very close fitting. So you have to look at how your sample fits and then apply that same amount of positive ease. And depending on your design, you may be able to give the knitter some modification options.
Well, and it's so much a difference in what the sweater is intended to look like and what it's meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because some sweaters are going to have 0 ease in the bicep. Some are going to
Right.
even have a negative 1-inch ease in the bicep. So
Mm-hmm.
I think what she's asking, and maybe I totally just said the wrong thing by what I
No, you
said.
didn't.
No, but I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm not saying that because the upper arm might be bigger than the size charts indicate in the larger sizes, you're going to make them extra big and then have an ill-fitting garment. I don't really mean that.
Right.
I mean that it's just a tricky thing to be mindful of. And this is a time
Mm-hmm.
when testing is really valuable. Get
Very
testers in
important.
all the sizes for your sweaters and see what people say about the fit. Make sure they're getting gauge, or
Mm-hmm.
at least know what their gauge is, before you rely on
Mm-hmm.
their feedback. But it's just a place that can be tricky. It's a place that is not, I think, always accurate in the charts that we use. And so
Mm-hmm.
knitters do often have to have that measurement before they begin the sweater so they can figure out what they need to do. But like Sarah said, you don't want extra ease in the bicep, or you want less ease. You want the ease it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a
According to
little
the
bit of wiggle
sample.
room. Yes,
Right.
according to the sample. But there is a little bit of wiggle room, because you can say on pattern that the bicep should have 0 to 2 inches positive ease,
Mm-hmm.
or 1 to 2 inches of positive ease, and make
Mm-hmm.
like a little bit of wiggle room. Not like wiggle room, but
Mm-hmm.
a little bit. And give like a 1 or 1.5 inch range for your suggested ease.
And there's another option too, that if your sweater design is such that your body is you can also tell your knitters to choose the size that they knit according to the bicep circumference that fits their body. So depending on the design, that also can be an option. You'll have to think about it. Not every design is going to work that way. But if
Right.
the body is very square and no shaping and it has a huge amount of ease in the body, then that may be an option for the sizing to be according to the bicep measurement. I have seen
That
that
is an option
happen,
too.
and
You
that's
can
an
do that.
option too. Yesy Design says, I'm just starting to try to design a sweater. Learning about so many things has been amazing. Sweater design is an art. It's not just dragging
I
the,
can't hear you good at
oh
all.
no, okay, so you talk.
Yeah, so you were reading that comment. I'm just try to design a sweater, and learning about so many things has been amazing. There's a lot to know. There's a lot to learn.
Mhm.
And I
There's a
think
lot.
there is. And that's honestly, when write a pattern, I would definitely do a lot of learning and reading and practicing, trying things out, right? Thinking about the things that you've learned and how you want things to be and how you want things to go, and just consume as much information as you can. Because the more you know ahead of time and the more work you do ahead of time, the more successful your pattern will be, and the less, like, I feel like it's always better to start with the best that you can get instead of having to do damage control for the whole thing after you've written it. I mean,
Yes, I agree with that.
so learning ahead of time is a really, really important step, I think.
There's so much information available in books and
Oh,
on
Sarah, I can't
website.
hear you.
Oh man.
You're all crackly. I heard the oh man.
There's a lot of information
Oh, there you are.
available on websites, in books. Consume as much as you can because it's art, not just math, to designing a sweater that fits a range of
Right,
sizes.
right.
The
We
last thing
did
we
do
need,
a video on
oh,
resources too.
that's right. So you can go back and look at my IG live feed, right?
Oh,
GTI.
is that one in there?
I think it is. I'll have to go back and look, but feel free to
And you have
message us.
stuff in your stories
Hmm.
too, highlights about
Hmm.
grading resources. Because there's
Yes,
stuff online and in books about grading.
right. The last thing we wanted to talk about was wrists, and I'm super opinionated about it. So you have to tell me if you can hear me.
We can
Can
right now. And
okay,
you're clear looking too.
I'm going to talk really fast. I have measured a lot of bodies, and not one had a wrist over 8.25 inches. So, if you have a sweater and you've designed the sweaters and you're grading the wrist measurement, a 12.5 inch wrist measurement, cuff measurement at the wrist, may not work unless that matches your sample's ease.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, if that's the fit you're going for, is having like a bell sleeve or something loose, that's one thing. But if it's meant to fit close to the wrist, and then in the other sizes, larger sizes, it's like you said, 12.5 inches. It's not, no,
It's not
people
going to
that are not
work.
going to want that.
A woman with a 58, 54, 56 inch bust is not going to want a huge cuff. She's going to want a cuff that fits the same as the sample.
Right.
So that means you might need to do some creative shaping in the sleeve in order to shape the sleeve that matches that body. And you're going to have to use your size chart really carefully.
Yeah, because you don't want to make those increases or decreases in the wrong place, and
Mm-hmm.
make the sleeve too tight in the wrong place. Um, but you need to be mindful that I've seen there's all the say you're knitting from the shoulder down, there's a lot of decreasing done right here. Okay. And all of a sudden, like, you do the gradual, all the sizes
Mm-hmm.
do the same thing, and then you get down here and some of the sizes go millions of decreases right here. And you have to consider how that's going to look and how your sleeve is going to look if you've just got all the decreases right here. What's that going to do with all this fabric? It's not going to, it might be better to do something a little more gradual if you can, than just having this hard and fast
Right.
decrease situation. So, because it is a great difference, right? I mean, our arms are not the same size from top to the bottom, you know.
Mm-mm. No.
So you do have to be creative, and that's where I think it's so important to do as much reading as you can, read patterns, and have
Mm-hmm.
done knitting of your own, and thought a lot about bodies, and looked into so many resources. There's so much out there
Mm-hmm.
because there's just you are going to have to get creative in a lot of places in your grading, and so the more you know about grading and about bodies, it's going to just make you even more, just all that more successful in getting those points to fit in your sizes.
And take advantage of testers. Not take advantage. Advantage is not the right word. Make sure that if you have the ability to have your pattern tested by a variety of sizes, so that you can determine where you might need to make adjustments in how you wrote the pattern.
Well, and think about the things you're concerned about, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, ask them to tell you
Mm-hmm.
all the things, all the questions and things that you you you're concerned about, that you want to know, and
Mm-hmm.
anything that they had trouble with, make sure they feel free to tell you, because you can learn a lot from all those sweaters that they're knitting.
Exactly.
But those are the things that often happen. The gauge will be wrong, the
Yep.
neckline will be too wide, the armholes will be too big, the bicep will be too small, the wrists will be too big, the underarm to the hip will be like totally wild depending on what kind of armhole situation you have. And those are the
So,
things we usually see.
so
Good
if
things
your
to watch
tech,
out for.
exactly, and if your tech editor points these things out to you, be sure to ask for advice. What would be the best way for me to fix this according to this design? I bet you your tech editor, he or she might have a really good idea of how to accommodate for your design to correct those sizing issues. Be sure to ask for help.
Well, yeah, and if she doesn't have it, in her own brain, she will probably definitely be able
Mm-hmm.
to refer you to resources and people that you can learn from. We have a
Exactly.
question. It says, without ease, what range of bust sizes would you consider to be size inclusive for a sweater? So also super opinionated about that.
Go. Tell us your opinion.
Well, generally, in our community, 60-inch bust body size, like you said, without ease, um, is sort of, you know, the the stopping point for the pattern to be considered size inclusive. So like
The
28 or
the
30 inches to 60 inches. So like 28 or 30 inches to 60-inch bust body size is generally considered size inclusive. I
there.
personally think
Mm-hmm.
it should be the 28, not the 30, and it should be 64. Anyway,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I do because I do, because there are a lot of people that have a 64-inch bust, not a 60-inch bust. There are a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people who have a 28-inch bust, not a 30-inch bust. So I think 64. I really think that. But if you're getting to 60, that's really good, because that's a lot more than we used to see. And I applaud any efforts to be size inclusive. I think it's really important. And I don't think there's any way around it. It's very important.
And if you're having trouble finding sizing tables, body size charts that high, I encourage you to look at Jill Walcott, Wolcott. She provides for free her size charts up to size 67-inch bust.
Yes, 67.
And there are other plus size body charts. Knit It Now, which is a machine knitting site, has plus size charts
Yep.
up to size 64,
I
I
think it's
think.
64.
Is it 64?
Yeah, Jill's is
So,
67, and I think 64.
and if you need some advice on how to get started in those upper sizes, please ask questions. There's a lot of information already online in my highlights, and in if you search the hashtag size inclusive, and you also look at some designers' patterns who do this well. You can do a lot of research and learn how to do this. This is not as hard as we think. If you can grade a size for size 56-inch bust, you can do it for size 60
Well, and I
or
think there's a
62.
way on Ravelry to search for size inclusive
There is.
patterns, and you can, some of them might be patterns you've already worked that you like, and you
Yes.
can learn from those patterns and see what kinds of things they implemented to make things work.
It,
But I think
it's
I mean, for me,
wonderful
there's
that you
no.
want to be size
It
inclusive. We
is
feel it's
wonderful.
incredibly important.
For me, there's like no excuse not to be. It's just, I don't know. It's wrong.
We have our opinions. Not everyone agrees with us, but as tech editors, we feel that this is something that we can be for, is to make sure that most patterns, or that patterns in general, can be knit by everyone, that they
Hmm.
shouldn't exclude others
Yeah.
in our community, that everyone in our community should have a size range in patterns that fits them,
All bodies
that fits
knit,
their body.
right?
Everybody knits.
So,
And saying that, I do want to address some common, I hope you can hear and see me.
yep, you're good right now.
A lot of times people say, well, I don't want to size up my patterns because I don't think this design would look good on that body size. But I want to encourage you to think about it in a different way. It's not our choice to decide what somebody else would want to knit, or what they would want to spend their money on for yarn, or what they think looks good on their own body. You can't judge for others what is best for them. So all we can do is provide a great pattern that fits all size bodies without judgment, and it gives the best instructions possible for modifications if they need to be made. So I think we need to pass out of the realm of that tendency, oh, I can't do it for all sizes
My
because
design
of
won't
X, Y,
look
and Z.
well in this size. My design won't work for that. This chart will never fit. What?
There's ways to make it work.
You don't get
You
to
can do it.
decide what sweater someone wants to wear? Well, I don't like to do that because then it makes my, patterns cost prohibitive. For buying yarn. What?
Yeah.
What?
There, yep. Are
It
you
is
going to
not up to
decide?
you what
It's
yarn
not up
people
to you what
buy.
somebody
It's
else
not up
wants
to
to
you how
buy.
someone wants to spend on yarn. What?
Right.
I mean, you can take that into account if you want to for everybody, right? If you want to
Right.
include options for, you know, yarn that isn't quite as costly, but you don't get to say, well, I'm just not going to design for larger sizes because they'll never be able to get all that yarn. Are you kidding me? I'm sorry. But most of the reasons that you hear that people give for deciding not to be size inclusive is excuses.
Right. Or they don't know how. So they're not going
Well,
to
and if you
try.
don't know how, that's a real reason because you don't know how and you're going to find
Yes.
out, right?
It's right.
And now there are lots of resources, like we
So many
just said, and
resources.
there are lots of, like we said, examples of size inclusive patterns that are done well. There are a lot of people that are doing it well that you can study. So, if
So
you
don't
don't
give
know,
excuses, ask for help.
yeah.
And we are here for you. If you really get stuck, you can always message us and say, hey, I need some resources for this particular problem. We want to do everything to help our community be size inclusive so that all new patterns are available for all bodies. I've had to make this adjustment in my own thinking because I'm a small body size. So it's taken a lot of work in my own head to come around to look at this in a not in a fat phobic way, in a way that is inclusive and accepting of all persons and all sizes. So I'll just admit that. I've had to do the work myself to change my thinking. And if I can do it, others can do it too.
Yeah, don't make excuses. That's crappy.
No excuses.
Be a good human. Do the right thing. I want to say something. So did you get any questions this week?
I didn't.
I didn't get any questions, but I did get a message from someone, and I've been getting a lot of messages like this year, and so I just wanted to say, I don't offer grading, and I thought that was like clear on my website, but maybe it's because we talk about fit so much, and you know what we talk about is so much about how relates to grading, but I don't offer grading. I don't do that service, so I can't grade your pattern.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm saying.
There, but you have a
But
lot of,
lots of people do. Lots of
we
people
know all
do.
the people who can.
Lots of people do.
I,
So I can always get names for you if you want,
mm-hmm,
or I can tell you where to go look to find
mm-hmm.
people who grade patterns. There's a lot of people who do it. I just am not one of those people.
And if you're really interested in learning how to grade yourself, your own patterns, and not pay someone for it, I do have a course if you go to my link tree in my profile, you can get more information there. I do grade patterns, but I do it on a very limited basis. So you got to jump early and think ahead if you want me to grade patterns for you.
And I do, to that point, I think if you are really considering sweater designing
Mm-hmm.
in a large way, it's something you want to do, I think it really behooves you and is really worth it to learn to grade your patterns yourself. You're going
Yes,
to
I
have
agree.
much more control. You'll be able to make all the decisions, decide how you
Mm-hmm.
want things to be. You won't have to, I mean, you'll be able to be in charge of how your design looks, and that's what you want. And I know a lot of designers who do their own grading, they have more freedom, right?
Mm-hmm.
And more control, more liberty. They're going to have less back and forth with people. It might make you feel more secure in what you're doing too. So if it's something you're going to be doing like long term, I really would think about that. Learning to grade yourself. And like Sarah said, they have a wonderful course with 3 instructors. They take you through everything. And there are also
Mm-hmm.
lots of books and resources online that you can learn about grading, size charts. So,
And
and
there's
books
other
that we've
courses available too, not just mine.
Right.
So
There are other
it
grading courses
you
too.
can
So like,
find the resources are there.
right. You can probably look up grading course.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, just something to think about. But there are people that offer grading if that's not your thing.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. So feel free to shoot us a message or a question this week if you guys have any in particular, or if you have a topic that you want us to talk about. I'm not sure what we're going to talk about next week. Christine, do
I'm
you have
not
any
sure.
ideas?
I haven't thought about it yet. Life is sort of weird right now here.
So we'll be back next week, Monday at 11 Eastern, 10 Central,
Yep.
and we'll talk more about tech editor tips.
Mm-hmm.
Please feel free to send us your questions or to send us your problems
Mm-hmm.
related to pattern writing or sweater designing, and we'll do our best to answer them in our next session. Do you have anything else, Christina?
I don't. Do feel free to ask questions, or if you have anything you want us to talk about
Mm-hmm.
that we haven't, or anything we did talk about that we should flesh out a little more, or anything specific you need resources on. Thank you. So,
Oh, we're
yeah,
glad you
let
were
us
here,
know.
Leslie. Thanks for joining us today. And we'll see you guys next Monday. Have a great week.
Have a
Take
great
care
week.
of
We'll see you next
yourselves.
week. Yeah.
Be safe. Be healthy. See you soon. Bye.